So now let us talk about a bit more in more detail about var and let. So var is, as I said, is related to before 2015, and let, we had let and constant after 2015. So generally before we had let here in JavaScript, we could use variables or var for either global scope and or inside of the block, or you can say the local variable. So generally when we are defining a variable outside of a block, and by the way, block is the kind of code written inside of the curly bracket. It could be a function, it could be an if statement, or a for loop, which we are going to talk about them later. But for now, a block is a place where we use our code, and it's considered as a local scope. And then we have the global scope, and notice that all of these codes that we've written here is considered as global scope. So let me also remove all of these unnecessary codes here. And so let me start new codes. By the way, let us keep all of these codes for later purposes. So let me create a new file, and I can call this variables.js. And also we can have variables and another new file called variables.html, and then again copy all of the codes inside output 4 into the variables.html. And by the way, let me just rename variables for future uses. Okay, variables.html and variables.js. So let us also change this one, because we want to refer to the variables.js. So variables.js is right here, and we have the code right here. Okay, anyway, so this is the global scope here. As you can see, let a equals, for example, 7. And we have variable, this is also a global scope. Variable b equals 8, for example. Okay, so here we have two kinds of declarations which are the same as each other, but there's a small difference between these two. Consider that variable or var here is whether it's inside of the global scope or the local scope, it's going to be the same. So it's not going to change or be different. The scope is global and local. But when you use let, when we define it inside the global scope and then we use it inside the local scope, it's going to change. So it's going to we can do it another time. So let me just create an example here for you to better understand it. So generally, if you're in a global scope, right, like the one that we are here, I can write let a, and I can redefine it like this. For example, let a equals to 4. And as you can see here, we've got an error, and my VS Code is showing an error. You cannot redeclare block scoped variable. So there's no need to check it in the console. As you can see here, you can see the error. So as you can see, block scoped variable cannot redeclare it. So what should we do here? We should remove let in order to change this one. So there's no need to redeclare another a, because a is already declared. We can only change this, and then a is going to change accordingly. It's also true about variables. So if we redefine b and say, for example, 7, oh no, this is not going to happen for variables, so you can redeclare it over and over again. But for let, this cannot happen. So Actually, that is true. So for variable, that is not going to happen, but for let, that is going to be a problem. Anyway, so let us create a code block. So here is a code block, and inside of it is considered as local. So let us see if we can write let a equals to example 6. And as you can see, we have no problem here, but let me use let another time for you to see. Here we're going to face an error when we write let a equals 1. In order to change this one, these two are repeated. Here we are in the global scope. So as you can see, I cannot repeat let here, but I can do it inside of the local scope, but not in the global scope. But with var or variable, that problem doesn't exist anymore. So as you can see here inside of the block, even if I create another variable b equals, for example, 10, semicolon, and as you can see, there is no problem here, even here. So local and global variables are very important to get to know, because later we're going to have functions, for loops, if loops. We're going to have different kinds of circumstances where we are inside the code blocks. And so scopes, generally scopes are important in nearly all of the programming languages, and it's very important to know how to use them and how to define or declare the variables. So here we got the difference between the variable and let. So variable, once you define something inside of a variable, it doesn't really matter how it changes. So let us console console.log the a here. Also, let me copy this and paste it after declaring b. So once again, and there we go. So we've got it, and let's see what we'll have on a and b here. So now here we've got variables.html, which was the one we were talking about. Let me see if there's any problem with that. Okay, we need to open it with, should be get opened with a kind of a browser. So let's open it with Google Chrome. Okay, here I didn't save the code, and as a result it wasn't considered as an HTML code. So let me just get back to here, and now we can simply open up with Google Chrome the same code, and it really doesn't matter what's written here. We're going to inspect the elements and see the console. So here we've got an error with the syntax, so let's see what it is. So some of the mistakes here or errors are not shown inside of the VS Code. As a result, let me just save all the codes, and here we have variables.js. So let's get deep into the error, what it is. By just saving the code, probably can do this. Let me just focus on the elements and the code here. The error should show up. So we have uncut syntax error, but it doesn't say which line. Okay, now the problem is a very small one. It was HTML by mistake, and here is JS. Okay, so once we save this code and refresh it, we're going to be able to see what's going to happen. As you can see, we have 4 and 10, and by the way, I had just changed something here. Let me change it back. So here we have no error actually, and the VS Code is showing us what we needed. So let me refresh this, and we have 4 and 10. Let us see what we had here. So a has been changed to 4, but by console.log a, we cannot see a equals to 6 because we have the scope which is local, not affecting the a. We have defined a another time, but here we have changed b to 10 inside of the local scope, but it has changed the state of b inside of the global scope. So b was 8, then it was changed to 7, and then changed to 10 even. So it's not a local scope, it's the global scope. And no matter it is inside of the block or not, it is going to still be inside of the changing inside of the global scope. So the variable b equals 10 has also changed b inside of the global scope, and we don't have actually anything such as local scope for var, but for let we have such thing as a local scope and global scope. And as a result, it's better to use let with the kind of browsers that are from 2015 on. And because most of the browsers that we are dealing today, nearly all of them are updated. We do not need to use variable anymore because it doesn't have a local scope. So from now on, we're not going to use var, and we can also, if you have seen the kind of codes written on GitHub and they have used var here, we can change them to let. It's much better because later you're going to be able to modify them and have local and global scopes. But if you don't want to get into complexity, and if you want to have the code operating in the way it used to, then you can keep it that way with var. And you should also care about the local and global scopes. So here we saw that b is 10 and a is 4, not 6.